9/11 Museum exhibit sparks fury. Is history being rewritten? Nearly 25 years after the horrific September 11th attacks, a museum in Dearborn, Michigan, affiliated with the Smithsonian Institution, is drawing criticism for how it presents this pivotal moment in American history. This museum, the Arab American National Museum, uses its exhibits and anniversary events to largely focus on discrimination and government actions that followed the attacks, while giving noticeably less attention to the nearly 3,000 people who lost their lives that day. The museum features an exhibit claiming Arab Americans suffered twofold from 9/11, first from the attacks themselves, and then from what it describes as unfair treatment by the U.S. government. A placard there states that while all Americans experienced horror and grief, Arab Americans were unfairly held responsible, even though no one was found guilty of any connection to 9/11. The museum also criticizes the government's post-9/11 detention of immigrants, some investigated for possible terrorist links, noting that virtually none were charged with terrorism. It claims Arabs faced harsher immigration enforcement, with some deported for minor visa violations that might have been overlooked before. Yet, historical records paint a more complex picture. For instance, President George W. Bush publicly urged Americans not to blame Muslims for the attacks. Polling by the Pew Research Center even suggested that favorable attitudes towards Muslim Americans actually increased in the immediate aftermath, rising from 45% in March 2001 to 59% by November of that year. Beyond its permanent displays, the museum frequently uses 9/11 anniversary programming to examine discrimination and law enforcement policies affecting Arab and Muslim communities. They host an annual Solidarity Town Hall where criticism of America's reaction to 9/11 is often the main focus. The online description for these events doesn't mention the victims of the attacks, instead emphasizing a safe space for communities to reflect and engage in dialogue about the harmful prejudices that Arab and Muslim individuals face. Founded in 2005, partially in response to increased scrutiny on the Arab American community after 9/11, the museum has received significant funding from various federal bodies, including the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the State Department. This funding and its Smithsonian affiliation are now raising questions, especially as the Smithsonian itself has faced scrutiny from conservative lawmakers over alleged political bias in its historical presentations. Adding to the controversy, the museum is scheduled to screen a film on the eve of the 9/11 anniversary that portrays Hamas's October 7th terrorist attack as part of a decade-long Palestinian struggle. A section of the museum also features art criticizing Israel's alleged occupation and apartheid. One piece cites a controversial group, If Americans Knew, claiming Israel has killed thousands of Palestinian children. This source has been criticized by some pro-Palestinian organizations for alleged anti-Semitism. Another display quotes Defense of Children International Palestine, an organization Israel designated as a terrorist entity in 2021, a designation disputed by human rights groups. The museum's gift shop further emphasizes Palestinian-themed merchandise, including items with maps and keffiyehs. Smithsonian affiliates like this museum operate independently, but maintain formal partnerships, accessing resources and expertise from the main institution. However, the Smithsonian has been under increasing pressure from Republican lawmakers and even former President Trump, who have threatened funding cuts if the institution doesn't address what they characterize as anti-American bias. Neither the museum nor the Smithsonian-affiliated bodies responded to requests for comment on these findings.